Welcome back, everyone. Grab a seat, settle in, and prepare for another journey into the strange and unsettling world of unexplained encounters. Tonight, we're going to follow the story of a man who never thought he would find himself caught up in the bizarre, someone who once would have laughed at anyone who claimed to see UFOs or aliens. Yet what happened to him completely changed his perspective on reality. This story is not about a fleeting light in the sky or a dream quickly forgotten. It is about a man who had a terrifyingly vivid vision one night, and then, while fully awake, came face to face with something that shouldn't exist, something straight out of that very dream. What he saw forced him to confront the unexplainable, shaking him to the core and leaving him to wonder if he had been given a warning of some kind. The man's name is Chad. In his late 40s, Chad had a stable life. He was married with children and had recently taken an early retirement from his career as a bank operations manager. He considered himself level-headed, responsible, and far from the type of person who chased after strange phenomena. In fact, before 2019, if you had told him a story like the one you're about to hear, he would have politely smiled and thought you were making it up. UFOs, cryptids, the paranormal. In his mind, all of that belonged in movies, conspiracy theories, or attention-seeking tales. But then his own life took a turn he never expected. Chad explains that it all began in August of 2019. That night, he fell asleep like any other, but the dream he experienced was unlike anything he had ever known. It was frighteningly real, and even when he woke up, the images lingered with him. In the dream, he was driving at night with his family in the car. The road wound through a dark area with thick trees on both sides. The sky had a strange, reddish tint to it, an unnatural color that made the entire scene unsettling. As they approached the crest of a hill, Chad noticed unusual lights flashing on the horizon, red and blue beams cutting through the night. His oldest son, sitting in the car, turned to him and said with excitement, "Dad, I want to go see those lights." But in the dream, Chad reacted with alarm. He told his son that those weren't just lights, they were alien crafts, and that these beings were not coming to help humanity, but to deceive us. Rather than continue toward the lights, he steered the car up a side road that climbed in elevation. From there he could see a small town below, with several tall buildings, and above them hovered a massive circular object. It was gray, huge, and not even attempting to hide. It clearly wanted to be seen. Down below, crowds of people had gathered. They were cheering and celebrating as if waiting for a great event, as though they were welcoming the arrival of something miraculous. Chad watched in horror as the craft sent down a bright yellow beam onto the rooftop of one of the tallest buildings. From that beam, something began to form, a massive white-colored entity. He couldn't make out all the details before he abruptly woke up, but what he saw terrified him. The creature was enormous, with the shape of a predator. Its build reminded him of a bear or perhaps a wolf, but with features that also suggested a lion. Later, when searching online, he found images of a legendary cryptid known as the Ozark Howler, and to his surprise, that was about as close as anything he had ever seen to what had appeared in his dream. Still shaken, Chad sat up in bed. Within minutes, however, he began to shrug it off. After all, it was just a dream. Bizarre, yes, but nothing more than that. He got ready for his day, preparing to drive his son to school. That morning seemed normal at first. Chad's son was taking his time getting ready, and like many parents do, Chad raised his voice, telling him to hurry up or he'd be late. The teenager responded with the usual teenage moodiness, avoiding eye contact and burying himself in his phone as they got into the car. Chad drove through his neighborhood, heading toward the main road. The subdivision's streets curved in such a way that he couldn't see the highway until he had almost reached it. But then, as he approached the intersection, he noticed something above the pine trees across the road. There, hovering just above the treetops, was a craft. Chad slowed down, stunned. It was football-shaped, large, and battleship gray. It hovered silently, motionless, almost as though suspended in time. In its center was a circular black spot, perhaps an opening of some kind. The entire object shimmered with a distortion, like heat waves rising from pavement on a summer day or the blurry ripples of gasoline fumes. The effect seemed to cloak it slightly, making it appear hazy and unreal. He stared at it in disbelief. He later compared the shock to what it might feel like if you suddenly saw a 75-foot-tall man run across the road. Your brain simply cannot process it because it isn't supposed to be possible. Meanwhile, his son never looked up from his phone. Completely unaware, he missed the entire encounter. Chad thought about reaching for his phone, about taking a picture, but for some reason he didn't. In the moment, it didn't even occur to him. He was too stunned, too locked into disbelief. His mind felt blank, as if in shock. He simply kept driving. By the time he reached the intersection, the trees blocked his view, and the craft was hidden from sight. He merged onto the highway, checked his mirrors nervously, half expecting the object to follow them. But it didn't. After dropping his son off at school, Chad drove home, his mind racing. He turned back onto his street and looked again toward the treetops. The object was gone. Back inside his house, Chad sat down, overwhelmed. What had he just witnessed? Was it real, or had his imagination tricked him? And then it hit him. The dream from that very same morning. The dream about alien crafts and deception. The connection was too eerie to ignore. He felt a chill run through him. It was as if the experience was sending him a message. We know where you are. We can reach you or your family whenever we choose. Fear gripped him. He decided then and there to tell no one. Not his wife, not his children, not even his closest friends. He would keep it a secret, convincing himself that silence was the safest choice. Weeks passed and Chad tried to push the experience from his mind. But just as he was beginning to convince himself it had been a one-time occurrence, something happened again. On October 4th, 2019, his oldest son's birthday, Chad was driving home after dropping both of his boys off at school. As he approached his neighborhood from the opposite direction this time, he spotted it. Another object hovered less than a mile from his home. This one looked similar to the first, but it was positioned differently in the sky. Once again, it was perfectly still, glowing faintly. Chad's stomach dropped as he remembered his dream, the one where his son had asked to see the red and blue lights. And now, here it was again, appearing on his son's birthday. The coincidence was too much. He considered driving toward it, but fear quickly overcame him. Instead, he pulled over to the side of the road and simply stared. For 6 minutes, he watched the strange object, timing it on the dashboard clock. It never moved, never shifted, simply hovered like an impossible star in the daylight. This time, Chad forced himself to act. He pulled out his phone and snapped a picture. Part of him hoped the image would show nothing, that maybe what he was seeing was some trick of the eye. But when he checked the photo, the object was there, blurry and distant but undeniably real. At that moment, Chad realized he could no longer keep this to himself. He told his wife and family, explaining everything. At first, they thought he might be joking, but when they saw how serious he was, they listened. To his relief, they were supportive, though naturally puzzled. His wife and kids offered ideas, trying to make sense of it. For Chad, it was both comforting and unnerving to finally share the truth. He admitted he sometimes wished his son had seen the UFO too, but others told him it was better that he hadn't, that it would have been too heavy a burden for a teenager to carry. Chad later had one more dream involving the crafts, this time with his wife present in the vision. That dream was deeply personal, and he chooses not to share the details. Still, the experiences left him with lingering questions. He often wondered if the sightings were tied to something larger, perhaps even a warning. He thought about knocking on the door of the house near where the craft had hovered to ask if the residents had seen anything, but he could never bring himself to do it. After all, who wants a stranger at their door asking about UFOs? Chad insists he doesn't consider himself psychic, prophetic, or chosen in any way. He doesn't seek attention and admits he is as confused as anyone else would be. But his gut tells him that what he saw had meaning. He now believes that these crafts may not come from distant planets at all, but from parallel dimensions. He imagines portals thinning the barrier between worlds, allowing these beings to enter ours. As unbelievable as it sounds, he can't shake the thought, especially as governments and militaries around the world begin to admit, after decades of denial, that unidentified aerial phenomena are real. To Chad, it feels like a veil is lifting, and more of these strange things are crossing over into our reality. Ultimately, he says, his faith remains in God above all else. He doesn't know what the encounters mean or whether his dream was meant to prepare him for something to come. But he does feel compelled to share his story, even if no one believes him. Chad's experience is detailed, unsettling, and deeply personal. Unlike vague accounts of lights in the sky, his story is tied to vivid dreams, emotional reactions, and repeated sightings. Whether these encounters were warnings, hallucinations, or something else entirely, they left a permanent mark on him. And that is the chilling part. What would you do if a nightmare seemed to bleed into reality, leaving you face to face with something impossible? Would you ignore it, dismiss it, or would you take it as a sign of something greater? For Chad, the answer is still unclear. But one thing is certain. His life was changed forever on that August morning in 2019 when a dream became reality and a bank manager found himself staring into the unknown.